The judge was looking directly at me when he said the words that were about to end my life. Mr. Klein, having been found guilty by a jury of your peers of receiving and selling stolen vehicle parts, a second-degree felony under the Texas Penal Code, I am sentencing you to... And then the door opened. Not the side door where the bailiff stands. Not the door to the jury room, the main door. The double door at the back of courtroom 4, Jefferson County District Court, Beaumont, Texas. The door that had been closed since the sentencing hearing began 40 minutes ago. The door that nobody was supposed to walk through because this was a closed proceeding, and the only people who were supposed to be in this room were already in it. A man walked in, black suit, white shirt, no tie, the kind of shoes that government employees wear. Functional, polished, not expensive, but maintained. He was about 40, medium build, and he moved with the unhurried precision of a man who knows that the room is about to change direction, and he is the reason why. The bailiff stepped forward. "Sir, this courtroom is in session. You can't..." The man reached into his jacket and produced a credential case. Flipped it open, held it up. The bailiff looked at it, looked at the man, and stepped back the way people step back when they see 3 letters that outrank everything else in the room. The man walked to the judge's bench. Not to the prosecution table, not to the defense table. Directly to Judge Harlan Waits, who was sitting behind the bench with the gavel still in his hand and the rest of my sentence still in his mouth. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Special Agent Devlin Crace, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Houston Division, Public Integrity Section." He set a sealed envelope on the bench. "This is a court order from the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Texas. I respectfully request that you read it before proceeding." The courtroom was silent. Not the quiet of a room that has stopped talking. The silence of a room that has stopped breathing. 30 people, the judge, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, the bailiff, the court reporter, the spectators, my wife, my mother, my children, all of them frozen, watching a man in a black suit hand an envelope to a judge who had been 3 words away from sending me to prison. Judge Waits looked at the envelope, looked at Agent Crace, looked at the envelope again. He broke the seal, unfolded the document, and read. 2 lines, that's all it took. 2 lines of text on a federal court order, and Judge Harlan Waits's face. A face that had been composed and judicial for the entire proceeding, the face of a man who has been on the bench for 20 years and has learned to keep his reactions behind the glass, went white. Not pale. White. The color of a man who has just read something that changes not only the case in front of him but his understanding of every case that has come before it in this courtroom with this prosecutor. He looked up. Not at me. At the prosecution table. At Assistant District Attorney Brock Endicott, who was sitting with his legal pad and his coffee and his 18 years of courtroom confidence, wearing the expression of a man who was expecting to hear a sentence, not a silence. "Mr. Endicott," Judge Waits said. His voice was different now. Not the measured, authoritative voice of a judge delivering a sentence. The careful, controlled voice of a man who is very angry and is choosing his words the way a surgeon chooses incisions. "This case is dismissed, effective immediately." The courtroom erupted. Not with applause, with confusion. The noise that comes when 30 people hear something that doesn't match the script they expected. The prosecutor's team shuffling papers. The spectators whispering. My defense attorney, Odessa Rourke, turning to look at me with an expression that said she understood exactly as much as I did, which was nothing. Endicott stood up. "Your Honor, on what grounds?" "Sit down, Mr. Endicott." "Your Honor, I have a right to..." "You have the right to sit down and remain silent, which I strongly advise you to exercise. Immediately." Endicott sat. Not because he wanted to, because the judge's voice had shifted from angry to dangerous, and even a prosecutor with 18 years of courtroom experience knows the difference between a judge who is annoyed and a judge who is about to detonate. Then Judge Waits turned to me. Shepard Klein, 42 years old, salvage yard operator. The man who had been sitting in the defendant's chair for 3 weeks, wearing the only suit he owned. A navy blazer he had bought at a Kohl's in 2019 for a cousin's wedding, listening to a prosecutor tell a jury that he was a criminal, and watching 12 strangers believe it. "Mr. Klein." The judge's voice changed again, not angry now, something else, something I had never heard from a judge and never expected to hear. "I owe you an apology." The room went completely still. Not as a judge, as a man. This court was about to take your freedom based on evidence that I now know was fabricated. The system that was supposed to protect you failed you." He paused, removed his glasses, set them on the bench. "I failed you, and I'm sorry." A judge apologizing from the bench to a defendant. In 20 years of practice, Odessa Rourke later told me she had never seen it. In 40 years of attending trials, the court reporter said the same. Judges don't apologize. Judges adjudicate. They rule. They sentence. They dismiss. They do not look at a man in a Kohl's blazer and say, "I'm sorry," in front of 30 witnesses and a court reporter who is typing every word. But Judge Harlan Waits did. Because what was in that envelope wasn't just a dismissal. It was the evidence that the man who had prosecuted me, the man who had sat 10 feet from me for 3 weeks and told a jury I was guilty, had fabricated the case from the beginning. But before I tell you what was in the envelope, before I tell you about Brock Endicott and the lies he built and the lives he destroyed to build them, I need to tell you who I am. Because this story isn't about a corrupt prosecutor or an FBI agent or a judge who apologized. It's about a man who takes apart cars for a living and was almost taken apart by a system that was supposed to be on his side. My name is Shepard Klein. I was born in 1983 in Beaumont, Texas, the kind of southeast Texas city that smells like petroleum refinery and pine trees in equal measure, where the humidity is a physical presence and the people are built to endure it. My father, Haskell Klein, worked at the ExxonMobil refinery on the Ship Channel for 31 years. My mother, Ruth, was a school cafeteria manager at Westbrook High. They raised me and my sister in a 3-bedroom house on Gladys Avenue that my father bought in 1980 for $44,000, and that is still standing, still occupied, and still worth roughly $44,000 because Beaumont real estate does not believe in optimism. I graduated from Westbrook High in 2001. I was not the top of my class. I was not the bottom. I was the middle, the vast, unremarkable middle that doesn't get scholarships or detention, that walks across the stage on graduation day to polite applause and is forgotten by the audience before the next name is called. I didn't go to college. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't want to. I wanted to work with my hands. I wanted to take things apart and understand how they worked and put them back together in a way that made them work better. That desire, the need to understand the machinery of things, led me to auto mechanics, which led me to bodywork, which led me to the salvage business, which led me to a small lot on Highway 90 East where I opened Klein's Auto Salvage in 2011 with $28,000 in savings, a tow truck I bought at auction, and a business license that cost $150. The salvage business is simple. Cars get damaged, accidents, floods, mechanical failure, age. Insurance companies total them. Owners sell them. I buy them. I strip them for parts. Engines, transmissions, alternators, radiators, doors, fenders, the hundreds of components that make up a vehicle and that other vehicles need when their own components fail. I sell the parts to repair shops, to shade tree mechanics, to anyone who needs a 2017 Camry door panel or a 2015 F-150 alternator and doesn't want to pay dealership prices. It's honest work. It's not glamorous. My hands are permanently stained with transmission fluid and brake dust. My clothes smell like metal and motor oil. My yard looks, to the uninitiated, like a junkyard. Rows of vehicles in various states of disassembly, stacked like a library of machines that have finished their primary purpose and are now serving their secondary one. But it's mine. I built it, and for 14 years I ran it honestly. Verified titles, paid fair prices, kept records, filed taxes, did everything the state of Texas requires a salvage dealer to do. I never cheated a customer. I never bought a vehicle I knew was stolen. I never cut a corner that mattered. Until September 17th, 2024, when 2 Jefferson County Sheriff's deputies pulled into my yard at 7:45 a.m. and told me I was under arrest for receiving and selling stolen vehicle parts, a second-degree felony, 2 to 20 years in prison, $10,000 in fines, and the end of everything I'd spent 14 years building. I was handcuffed next to the crusher, the hydraulic press that flattens vehicle hulls into cubes of scrap metal. The deputies were professional. Not rough, not cruel, just efficient, the way law enforcement is efficient when they have a warrant and a job to do and the man they're arresting is standing in a salvage yard looking at them with the particular bewilderment of a person who doesn't understand what's happening because nothing happening makes sense. Mr. Klein, you're being charged with 7 counts of receiving stolen property. You have the right to remain silent. 7 counts? I haven't bought anything stolen. Sir, I need to read you your rights. I check every title, every single one. I have records. Sir, your rights. I shut up. Because the man with the handcuffs was not interested in my records, and the time for explaining would come later, and the concrete I was standing on, the concrete I had poured myself when I built the yard, was suddenly the coldest surface I had ever stood on. Marisol was at work when I was arrested. She's a veterinary technician at a clinic on Dowland Road, has been for 11 years. She found out when my one phone call came through at 10:30 a.m. Shep, what's wrong? I've been arrested. What? I'm at the Jefferson County Jail. They're saying I bought stolen vehicles. That's insane. I know it's insane, but I need bail, and bail is $75,000. Marisol Klein, née Garza, is the kind of woman who does not waste time on panic when action is required. She called a bail bondsman. She called her mother to pick up the kids from school. And she drove to our house on Concord Road, gathered our mortgage documents, and posted our home as collateral for the bond. She put our house on the line to get me out of a cell. Our house. The house where our children sleep. The house we had spent 12 years paying for. You didn't have to do that, I told her when she picked me up. You didn't steal anything, Shep, so yes, I did. The prosecution's case was built by Brock Endicott with the precision of a man who has constructed false cases before and knows exactly how to make them look real. I didn't know that at the time. At the time, I thought the charges were a mistake, a misunderstanding that would be resolved when someone competent looked at the evidence. I was assigned a public defender. Odessa Rourke, 38 years old, managing 43 active cases, operating out of an office that was smaller than my salvage yard break room, with a legal assistant who was also the receptionist and the office manager and the person who fixed the printer when it jammed, which was constantly. Odessa was smart. I need to be clear about that. She was not the problem. She saw the weaknesses in Endicott's case immediately. The VIN records show 7 vehicles processed through your yard were reported stolen, but VIN records alone don't prove you knew they were stolen. The titles. I checked every title. They all looked legitimate. I believe you. The question is whether a jury will believe you. And the prosecution has a witness, a confidential informant who claims you knowingly purchased stolen vehicles. Who? A man named Loomis Bird. He says he sold you 3 stolen vehicles and that you knew they were stolen. I've never heard that name in my life. He says he knows you. He's lying. I believe he's lying. But proving someone is lying requires investigation, forensic analysis of the titles, background on the informant, examination of the prosecution's disclosure. I have 43 cases, Shepard. I will do everything I can for you, but I need you to understand that everything I can and everything that's needed are not the same thing when you're a public defender in Jefferson County, Texas. She was honest with me. I respected that, and I understood what she was saying. The system provides you an attorney. The system does not provide you justice. Those are 2 different products, and only one of them is guaranteed. The trial began in March 2025. 3 weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, cross-examination, and the particular theater of a criminal trial, where the prosecutor performs certainty, and the defense performs doubt, and the jury watches both performances and decides which one was more convincing. Brock Endicott was convincing. I'll give him that. He was 46 years old, had been trying cases for 18 years, and had the courtroom presence of a man who believed his own narrative so completely that the believing made it sound true. He stood in front of the jury and painted a picture of Shepard Klein as a man who operated a salvage yard as a front for a stolen vehicle parts operation, buying stolen cars at a discount, stripping them for parts, selling the parts at full retail, pocketing the difference. The defendant will tell you he didn't know the vehicles were stolen, Endicott said in his opening statement. He'll tell you he checked the titles. He'll tell you he's just a small businessman trying to make a living. But the evidence will show that 7 stolen vehicles, 7, passed through his yard in a 15-month period. 7 vehicles with VINs that were reported stolen to law enforcement. And the defendant, a man who has been in the salvage business for 14 years, expects you to believe he didn't notice? The jury nodded. Not all of them, but enough. Because the number 7 sounds like a pattern, and a pattern sounds like intent, and intent sounds like guilt. What the jury didn't hear, what Endicott made sure they didn't hear, was the truth about those 7 vehicles. The vehicles were stolen by Denny Clough's crew. Clough operated a vehicle theft ring across southeast Texas, stealing cars from driveways, parking lots, and dealerships, then creating forged titles using stolen blank title paper obtained from a corrupt employee at a DMV office in Orange County. The forged titles were professional grade. Correct paper stock, correct watermarks, correct formatting. They were designed to pass visual inspection at any salvage yard, used car lot, or dealer in Texas. Clough's crew sold stolen vehicles to at least 12 different businesses across 4 counties. Shepard Klein was one of 12 buyers, not a conspirator, not a fence, a customer who was deceived by professional-grade forgeries. Endicott knew this. He knew it because his own confidential informant, Loomis Bird, had told him during the initial interview. Loomis had been a member of Clough's crew, a driver who transported stolen vehicles to buyers. When Loomis was arrested on a separate drug charge in June 2024, Endicott offered him a deal. Testify against one of the buyers, and the drug charges go away. Which buyer? Loomis asked. Klein, the salvage guy on Highway 90. I sold him 3 cars, but he didn't know they were stolen. We had the forged titles. Nobody knew. That's not what you're going to say. What am I going to say? You're going to say he knew. You're going to say he asked for specific makes and models. You're going to say he paid below market because he knew the vehicles were stolen, and the discount was his incentive to look the other way. But that's not true. It will be, by the time we're done preparing your testimony. 7 meetings. Endicott met with Loomis 7 times between July and September 2024. Each meeting refined the story. Each meeting added details that hadn't been in the original account. Each meeting moved Loomis's testimony further from the truth and closer to the narrative that Endicott needed to secure a conviction. And Endicott suppressed the evidence that would have destroyed his own case. He suppressed the forged title analysis that showed the forgeries were created by Clough's crew, not by Shepard. He suppressed Loomis's initial statement that Shepard didn't know the vehicles were stolen. He suppressed the polygraph results from Loomis's initial arrest, which showed deception on key questions. He suppressed the fact that 4 of the 12 businesses that bought from Clough's crew were not charged. Businesses owned by people with political connections in Jefferson County. Every suppression was a Brady violation, the legal obligation to disclose exculpatory evidence to the defense. Every suppression was a federal crime, and every suppression was invisible to Odessa Rourke because you can't find what you don't know exists, and Odessa was managing 43 cases with 1 legal assistant and a broken printer. The jury convicted me in 4 hours. 4 hours to end a life. 4 hours to look at a man in a Kohl's blazer who had never committed a crime and decide that he was a criminal. The foreperson read the verdict, guilty on all 7 counts, and I sat in the defendant's chair and listened to the word guilty the way you listen to a diagnosis you didn't expect from a doctor you trusted. Guilty, 7 times. A word that sounds different when it's being said about you than when you hear it on television. On television, guilty is a plot point. In a courtroom, guilty is a trapdoor. And I was falling. Marisol was in the gallery. I heard her gasp, not a cry, a gasp, the involuntary sound of a woman whose husband has just been convicted of a crime he didn't commit, and the sound carries everything she is feeling. Disbelief, terror, rage, love, compressed into a single intake of breath. Sentencing was scheduled for April 8, 2025, 3 weeks after the verdict. 3 weeks of waiting. 3 weeks of sitting in my house on Concord Road, the house that was mortgaged for my bail, looking at my children, looking at my wife, looking at the walls that might be the last walls I see as a free man for the next 2 to 20 years. Nash was 12. He understood. He understood with the particular clarity of a 12-year-old boy who has been watching his father go through a trial and has been absorbing the fear and the injustice and the helplessness, and has decided, the way boys decide these things, that the world is not fair, and his father is proof. Dad, you didn't do it. I know, buddy. Then why did they say guilty? Because the man who accused me was very good at lying, and the people who were supposed to catch the lies didn't have the tools to catch them. That's not fair. No, it's not. Can we do anything? We can hope that someone, somewhere, is doing what the system was supposed to do. I didn't know, when I said that someone was. I didn't know that 600 miles away, in a federal building in Houston, a team of FBI agents had been investigating Brock Endicott for 6 months. I didn't know that my case was one of 9 cases flagged in an investigation called Operation Clean Docket. I didn't know that Special Agent Devlin Crace had been building a file on the man who built a file on me, and that the file was almost complete. I didn't know any of that. I just sat in my house and waited for sentencing day and tried to figure out how to tell an 8-year-old girl that her daddy might be going away for a while. Bria was 8. She didn't understand the trial. She understood absence. She understood that her father had been stressed and sad, and that her mother had been crying in the bathroom when she thought nobody could hear. She understood that something was wrong the way children understand weather. Not the science of it, but the feeling. The pressure drop. The heaviness in the air before the storm. "Daddy, are you going to jail?" "I hope not, baby. Mommy says you didn't do anything wrong." "Mommy's right." "Then why are you sad?" "Because sometimes people say things that aren't true, and other people believe them. And when that happens, the person who told the truth gets hurt. That's what happens at school, too." "Yeah, it happens everywhere. But at school, the teacher fixes it." "I'm waiting for someone to fix it, Bria. I'm waiting." April 8th, 2025. Sentencing Day. I put on my Kohl's blazer. Marisol wore the same black dress she had worn every day of the trial. We drove to the courthouse on Pearl Street in silence. Not the angry silence of a couple who has nothing to say. The terrified silence of 2 people who are driving toward the moment that will determine whether they sleep in the same house tonight. The courtroom was full. Marisol in the front row of the gallery. My mother, Ruth, beside her, 70 years old, holding a rosary, her lips moving in prayer so quiet that only God and the woman beside her could hear it. Nash and Bria were not there. Marisol had decided they should not watch their father be sentenced. I agreed. Some things children should not see, and their father in handcuffs is one of them. Endicott was at the prosecution table, confident, relaxed, the posture of a man who has won and is now present for the formality of the punishment. He had his legal pad open to a page of notes, sentencing recommendations. He was going to ask for 8 years. I knew this because Odessa had told me, and Odessa knew because prosecutors telegraph their sentencing positions to defense attorneys as a matter of practice. 8 years. My daughter would be 16 when I got out. My son would be 20. My wife would be 47. My salvage yard would be gone. The lease would expire. The inventory would be auctioned. The business I built in 14 years would be dismantled in 14 months. 8 years. Judge Waits entered. "All rise." We rose. He sat. We sat. The ritual of a courtroom, mechanical and familiar, and absolutely terrifying when the mechanism is aimed at you. "Mr. Klein, please rise." I stood. My legs were steady. My hands were not. I pressed them flat against the defense table to keep them from shaking, because a man standing before a judge to receive a sentence should at least look like he can bear it, even if he can't. Having been found guilty by a jury of your peers of receiving and selling stolen vehicle parts, a second-degree felony under the Texas Penal Code, I am sentencing you to... The door opened. Everything I have told you about what happened next, the man in the black, suit, the envelope, the judge's face, the dismissal, the apology, happened in approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes between the moment the door opened and the moment Judge Waits said, "I'm sorry." 4 minutes that contained more information, more reversal, more justice than the entire 3-week trial that preceded them. But those 4 minutes had a backstory that I didn't learn until weeks later, when Devlin Crace sat across from me in a conference room at the FBI's Houston field office and explained what had been happening while I was sitting in a courtroom believing my life was over. Operation Clean Docket began in September 2024, the same month I was arrested. The FBI's Public Integrity Section, which investigates corruption by government officials, had received a tip from a former assistant in the Jefferson County DA's office. The former assistant, who had left the office in 2023 after being pressured to alter case files, reported that ADA Brock, Endicott, had a pattern of fabricating and suppressing evidence in cases involving vulnerable defendants. The FBI opened an investigation. Agent Crace was assigned as lead. Over 6 months, Crace's team examined Endicott's case history. They found 9 cases spanning 4 years where Endicott had suppressed exculpatory evidence, information that would have helped the defense, in violation of Brady v. Maryland. Coached witness testimony by meeting with informants repeatedly and shaping their statements to match the prosecution's narrative. Selectively prosecuted vulnerable defendants, people without resources, without connections, without the ability to mount a vigorous defense, while declining to charge better connected suspects involved in the same criminal activity. Used confidential informants who were incentivized to lie, offering reduced charges in exchange for testimony that the informants knew was false. My case was number 7 of 9. 7 stolen vehicles. 7 counts. 7 lies. Crace's team obtained Loomis Bird's original interview recording, the one where Loomis said Shepard didn't know the vehicles were stolen. They obtained Endicott's meeting notes from the 7 sessions where he coached Loomis's testimony. They obtained the suppressed forensic analysis of the forged titles. They obtained the polygraph results. And they obtained the list of 12 businesses that bought from Clough's crew, 4 of which Endicott had declined to prosecute. "Why those 4?" Crace asked during our debrief. "I don't know. Because those 4 are owned by people who donate to the Jefferson County DA's re-election campaign. Endicott wasn't just fabricating cases, Mr. Klein. He was choosing who to fabricate them against. And the criteria was not guilt or innocence. It was vulnerability. I was vulnerable. You were perfect. A salvage yard operator, no lawyer on retainer, no political connections, a business that most people associate with shady dealings, even when it's run honestly. You were the ideal defendant for a prosecutor who needed conviction statistics and didn't care whether the convictions were real." The federal court order that Agent Crace carried into the courtroom was signed by Judge Elise Fontaine of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas. It contained 2 directives. First, immediate dismissal of all charges against Shepard Klein, based on evidence of prosecutorial misconduct rendering the conviction unsound. Second, notification that ADA Brock Endicott was now the subject of a federal investigation for obstruction of justice, deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, witness tampering, and Brady violations. 2 lines, 2 directives. The first gave me back my life. The second took Endicott's. When Judge Waits read those 2 lines, he understood immediately what had happened. A prosecutor in his courtroom, a man he had worked alongside for years, a man he had trusted to present truthful cases, had been fabricating evidence and framing innocent people. The judge's face went white because the failure wasn't just Endicott's, it was the system's, and the judge was part of the system. "This case is dismissed, effective immediately." Then he turned to me, removed his glasses, and apologized. The aftermath in the courtroom was chaos. Endicott stood up, tried to speak, was told to sit down. His face went through the stages that guilty faces go through when the guilt is suddenly visible. Denial. This is a mistake. Bargaining. I can explain. Anger. This is a witch hunt. And finally, the blank, flat expression of a man who realizes that the power he used to destroy others has just been turned on him. Agent Crace approached Endicott at the prosecution table. "Mr. Endicott, you are not under arrest at this time. However, I need to inform you that you are the subject of an ongoing federal investigation. I advise you to retain counsel immediately." Endicott looked at Crace, at Judge Waits, at me. And for the first time in what I imagine was a very long time, Brock Endicott had nothing to say. The man who had built careers on words, on opening statements and closing arguments and the careful, practiced manipulation of language designed to make innocent people sound guilty, was silent. I walked out of the courtroom, down the hallway, through the lobby, through the front door of the Jefferson County Courthouse, into the April morning, into the Beaumont humidity, into the sunlight that hit my face like a hand that was checking to see if I was real. Marisol was behind me. She had been running. I heard her heels on the courthouse tile, the sound of a woman who had mortgaged her house for a man she believed in and was now watching the system prove her right. She grabbed me in the parking lot, both arms around me, her face against my chest, and she cried, not the quiet crying of the trial, not the controlled, stoic, sit in the gallery and don't let them see you break crying. The full, released, shaking, gasping crying of a woman who had been holding her family together with her fingernails for 7 months and had just been told she could let go. "It's over," I said. "Is it really over?" "It's over. Dismissed. All of it." The judge apologized. "Yeah." "A judge apologized to you." "Yeah." "Shepard Klein, if you ever scare me like that again, I will kill you myself and save the state of Texas the trouble." I laughed. The first real laugh since September. standing in a courthouse parking lot in Beaumont, holding my wife, laughing because the alternative was collapsing, and I had done enough collapsing for one lifetime. Brock Endicott was indicted by a federal grand jury in June 2025. 12 counts: obstruction of justice, deprivation of rights under color of law, witness tampering, and Brady violations across 4 cases, mine and 3 others where the evidence of fabrication was strongest. The remaining 5 cases are still under investigation. Loomis Byrd was charged with perjury. He cooperated with the FBI, fully this time, without Endicott coaching his answers, and provided testimony about the 7 meetings where Endicott shaped his statements. Loomis received a reduced sentence on the perjury charge in exchange for cooperation. Denny Clough, the man who actually stole the vehicles, was already in state custody, arrested by Texas Rangers in a separate operation 4 months before my trial. His crew was dismantled. The corrupt DMV employee who provided blank title paper was fired and charged. The 4 businesses that Endicott declined to prosecute are now under investigation by the Texas Attorney General's office. The political donations that shielded them are being scrutinized. And the other defendants, the other 8 people in Operation Clean Docket who were prosecuted by Brock Endicott on fabricated evidence, are having their cases reviewed. 3 have already been dismissed. 2 are pending. 3 are in the appeal process. 8 people, 8 lives disrupted, damaged, or destroyed because one prosecutor decided that conviction statistics mattered more than truth. Judge Waits recused himself from all pending cases related to Endicott. He issued a public statement. The integrity of this court was compromised by a prosecutor I trusted. I take responsibility for not seeing it sooner. The defendants who were wrongly convicted in my courtroom deserve more than an apology. They deserve a system that works. I am committed to being part of that repair. I went back to the yard the day after the dismissal. Klein's Auto Salvage. Highway 90 East. The same lot, the same crusher, the same rows of vehicles waiting to be stripped and cataloged and sold. Cletus Hamblin was there. He had been running the yard for 7 months while I was dealing with the trial. He's 50, says less than anyone I've ever met, and runs a salvage yard the way some people run temples, with quiet devotion and 0 tolerance for disorder. "Welcome back," he said. "Thanks, Cletus. The crusher needs a new hydraulic line. I'll look at it this afternoon. Also, there's a 2019 Silverado in Bay 3 that came in last week. Clean title, good engine. The transmission's shot, but the transfer case is mint. I'll pull the transfer case tomorrow." "Good," he paused. "Glad you're not in prison." "Me too, Cletus. Would have been hard to fix the hydraulic line from prison. That's what you were worried about? The hydraulic line? Priorities. That's Cletus. The man expresses love through equipment maintenance. I wouldn't have it any other way. 6 months have passed. It's October 2025. Beaumont autumn, which in southeast Texas means the humidity drops from unbearable to merely oppressive, and the mosquitoes transition from aggressive to merely persistent. The yard is running. The crusher is fixed. The hydraulic line was a $340 repair that Cletus could have done himself, but waited for me because, I suspect, he wanted me to have something to do with my hands on my first day back. Nash comes to the yard on Saturdays now. He's 12, old enough to learn, young enough to still think a salvage yard is the coolest place on earth. I'm teaching him what I know, how to pull an engine without damaging the wiring harness, how to test an alternator with a multimeter, how to read a vehicle's history by the wear patterns on its parts. He's good at it. He has the patience for it, which is the thing you can't teach. Bria drew me a picture last month. A crayon drawing of a man standing next to a car with no wheels. The man is smiling. Above the man, in the handwriting of an 8-year-old who is still working on her letter spacing, it says, "My dad fixed cars and he is innocent." Innocent, with 2 N's and 1 misspelling that I will never correct because the misspelling is the most accurate legal document I have ever received. I framed it. It's on the wall of my office at the yard, next to my business license and my ASE certification, and the letter from the court formally dismissing all charges. 4 documents on 1 wall. The business license says I'm allowed to work. The certification says I'm qualified. The dismissal says I'm innocent. And the crayon drawing says I'm loved. Those 4 things, permission, qualification, innocence, and love, are the only assets that matter. Everything else is inventory. Marisol and I had dinner last week, just the 2 of us. The kids were at her mother's. We went to Rouse on Calder Avenue, not fancy, just good. The kind of place where the owner knows your name and doesn't charge extra for the bread. We sat across from each other, and for the first time in a year, we talked about something other than lawyers and charges and court dates and the specific grinding anxiety of living under the weight of a criminal case that shouldn't exist. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free." "Is that enough?" "It's everything. Free and here with you, eating bread that someone didn't charge extra for. That's the whole list, Marisol. You're a simple man, Shepard Klein." That's what Endicott was counting on. And look where it got him. Look where it got both of us. She reached across the table and took my hand, the hand that pulls transmissions and swings, wrenches, and signs titles, and held a daughter who asked if her daddy was going to jail. She held that hand, and she didn't let go for the rest of the meal. "Now, I want to ask you something. What would you do if the system that's supposed to protect you, was the thing trying to destroy you? What would you do if the man standing in front of the jury, the man in the suit, the man with the authority and the badge and the title, was the liar? And what would you do if you were 3 words away from a prison sentence when a door opened and the truth walked in? Would you trust the system again? Would you go back to work and pull transmissions and fix hydraulic lines and live your life like nothing happened? Or would you carry the scar of it, the 7 months, the guilty verdict, the 3 words the judge almost finished, for the rest of your life? And here's the harder question. How many Shepard Kleins are out there right now? How many people are sitting in courtrooms, wearing borrowed blazers, listening to prosecutors lie about them, with public defenders who believe them but can't save them? How many people don't get the envelope? How many people don't get the door opening at the last second? Because I got the door, I got the envelope, I got the 4 minutes that saved my life. But I know with the certainty of a man who sat in that chair and heard the word guilty 7 times, that not everyone does. And the ones who don't, the ones who are sitting in prison right now because Brock Endicott decided their freedom was worth less than his conviction rate, those people deserve a door too. I can't open it for them. I'm a salvage yard operator. I take apart cars, I don't take apart systems. But I can tell this story, and maybe someone who can take apart systems will hear it. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story made you think about justice, real justice, not the kind that comes in a courtroom, but the kind that comes when the courtroom fails and someone has to fix it, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, especially anyone who has been told they're guilty when they know they're innocent. The door is still out there, and sometimes at the last second it opens. Comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.